Hi, welcome to today's episode. This is Conan, and I'm your host for today. We're honored to have Dr. Bill Farley from Southern Connecticut State University. He specializes in the study of native New England in the colonial period, especially in the 17th century. He is a specialist in archaeobotany, which is the study of the intersection of people and plants. His research is focused on the early colonial interactions of Native Americans and Euroamericans in southern New England, especially in Connecticut and Massachusetts. However, Dr. Farley has also been studying the intersection of archaeology and video games, and he's here to talk to us about that today. Dr. Farley, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. Yeah, I have all that spiel. We're not going to talk about any of that.
Nope, not really. Just a little piece of it.
Talking about all this weird other stuff that I've been having some fun with lately. So maybe some places where those things intersect. But
so, like every well-written video game, the protagonist and the antagonist have a backstory. What's your origin story? And how did you get into archaeology?
yeah, I think my origin story in archaeology is pretty typical. Before I went to college, I didn't know very much about archaeology at all, other than just the absolute basic pop culture sort of experiences that we all have. But I loved history and I loved writing, and so I went to college. I thought I wanted to be a journalist. I was going to go to school to be a journalist. Which is a bullet I apparently dodged, so that I could go into a nice safe field like anthropology. And I took a bunch of courses my first semester, just general education requirement classes, and one of them was an introduction to anthropology class, which was taught by the then Connecticut State archaeologist, who is a phenomenal professor and just a really inspiring public speaker, public presence. And, this was a huge lecture hall, 250 kids. And I was just sucked in by him, by everything he taught. I wanted to do what he did. And I had always loved history. But this idea of doing history, but with the material aspect of archaeology and the field aspect really drew me in. The idea of being able to be outside and work in the woods. I'd been a big camper, done scouts and all that stuff all through my childhood. So I loved the outdoors, and I still do. So that part really drove me in. It just seemed like this sort of perfect fit. So I started taking classes in archaeology, worked in CRM. A little bit as an undergrad, and afterwards worked for museums and things like that. And then I went to graduate school where I got a chance to teach for the first time, or sort of TA, sort of be in the classroom. And then I fell in love with teaching very quickly, which is still my passion today. So that's where I decided I wanted to try and pursue a career in academic archaeology, which is really a hard career path, and I got very lucky with the opportunities that I've been given. So yeah, maybe not the most exciting story in the world, but it's a kind of a typical one, so maybe relatable instead.
So with that, what's your background in video games?
So my background in video games is much older than my background in archaeology. In that I've been playing games for as long as I can remember. My father was and is still to this day a little bit of a technophile. So he even though he's not like a huge computer guy, he sort of just loved gadgets. And so he would buy video game consoles way back before I was even born, even though I don't think he ever really even played them. So, when I was growing up, we had an Atari 2600 and a Commodore 64 and eventually an Apple II. And those were sort of the first video games I ever played. My first memories of games are actually mostly on the Commodore 64. And then we had a Nintendo, an NES, and an SNES. And then by the time the Super Nintendo came out, and that period of when JRPGs like the Final Fantasy series were really getting huge in the Super Nintendo and then the PlayStation era, is when I really became a lifelong player of games and lover of games. And ever since, I've dabbled and just been interested in them. And having an academic mindset and going to graduate school, I've never been able to help myself thinking critically about games. I think everybody does to a certain extent, right? But I couldn't turn that muscle off when playing games. As I got older and I got more experience working with things like media criticism and learning about and thinking about those ways with literature and reading, something else that I love to do. I just wanted to apply those skills to games. And so I've been thinking that way for many years, which sort of led eventually to this little project that I guess we're talking about today.
So, how did you make that correlation between archaeology and video games?
So this story is also saying a lot of these have some mundane sources, but I had this idea of very practical, right? There's really only the two things I know a lot about. I mean, I know stuff about other things, but the two things I know maybe the most about are archaeology, just because obviously I've gone to school for ages and studied it, and games, because it's something that I've been playing and thinking about critically since I was, since my earliest memories, since I was 3-4 years old, frankly. So I knew a lot about these two things. And so I had been kind of kicking around this idea in my head for years of what's the intersection of those things? Where is there something there worth thinking about? And then during the pandemic, when we were all so isolated, and my job really changed during that time, like every professor, every teacher, right? I wasn't interacting with students in the same way, teaching all these online asynchronous classes, wasn't really advising in the same way. I just felt like I was very disconnected from my students and from teaching, and feeling pretty depressed, just like everybody, right? I'm certainly not alone in that. And so it seemed like the time to do something with this. So I thought, well, maybe I'll start a YouTube channel. And so I did. I just opened this YouTube channel, and I just checked, and video game archaeology was available as a YouTube channel title. So I just grabbed it and just started literally just making videos, just throwing things on the internet, like not very thoughtfully, not a lot of production quality. I had no idea what I was doing. Didn't know how to edit videos, didn't know how to edit audio, didn't have a microphone. I was just talking into my headphones and a terrible audio, and just throwing that stuff up there. And then that project just sort of started to evolve. And very quickly, what I did was I said, okay, so I'm doing this. Is this really new? Have I really invented something here? I was sure that I hadn't. I'm sure other people were thinking about it. But what I didn't realize was that there actually was already a pre-existing, quite robust, vibrant little subdiscipline called archaeogaming, which is there were a bunch of archaeologists out there who were doing this kind of work. Not exactly the same thing that I was doing, but similar, right? Doing media criticism, thinking about video games through the lens of archaeology. And there were also lots of other scholars doing that, historians and sociologists and economists, I don't know, whatever you can imagine, of gender studies, queer theory folks, people who were applying all these great, vibrant ideas to this medium of games, which has, until pretty recently, sort of skated by without getting that sort of analysis, unlike, say, films, right, which have been analyzed through those lenses for decades, very thoughtfully. So it was cool to find that I had actually jumped into the deep end of an already existing, quite vibrant community, and it's a cool place to be hanging out.
Now, in your videos, you cover archaeology topics such as taphonomy and creating spaces in video games. How or can video games creators use these concepts to build more immersive environments for their games?
I think so. So I think some makers are already doing this, and without even necessarily knowing they're doing it. Like, they don't think like, oh, we're thinking archaeologically here, or we're thinking historically even. But the best games that have a great sense of place, at least for me, and I think for a lot of other people, a sign that a game is really good is a game that makes you feel immersed in a place. It feels like a real place. It doesn't have to be the real world. It can be total fantasy. It can be total sci-fi. It can be, crazy aliens, whatever. It can be anything. It does not have to be our world, but it feels like you're in a real place that has a history, that has time depth, that has ancestry and heritage and all this stuff that we take for granted as a part of the human experience. Really good games achieve that. And sometimes I think they achieve it sort of by luck or through pure artistic, talent or something. But a lot of games don't. A lot of games feel very shallow in that way. And they can still be fun, but they're never going to reach that same level of artistic achievement of games that do achieve that. And so I think that game makers could, and in some cases are, learn from scholars like archaeologists, like historians, like other types of folks who study space and place and time and depth, and those sorts of things. Maybe even paleontologists, geologists, who knows, right? All those scholars have things that actually could help game makers more easily achieve that sense of place that makes a game feel really visceral and deep and meaningful. And that really, and then from there, games can achieve kind of an artistic level that they otherwise couldn't, I think. So I think the answer is yes. Yeah.
So is there any projects that you're currently working on that you would like to share? Not necessarily.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, not necessarily video game related, but just in general, any projects.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I'll point people towards is if you want to look into this, what I'm doing in this realm. I have this YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/c/video game archaeology, all one word. That's my YouTube channel in which I'm talking about all this stuff and diving into different games. So 35 videos up there so far. And some of them super duper high effort, some of them much smaller, simpler kinds of things. And so there's a little bit of something there for everybody. So that in this realm, that's where I'm kind of spend most of my time, is trying to build that channel and working a lot on my next big video, which I'm hoping to come out in the next couple of weeks. So please do check that out. Out in my day job, if you will, what I consider my day job, my sort of normal archaeology job. I have an archaeological field school in Connecticut that actually starts next month in July at the Henry Whitfield House, which is in Guilford, Connecticut. So if anybody's in the Connecticut area are going to be passing through, it's a state museum public dig. We'll be out there Wednesdays through Fridays all that month, doing other stuff on Mondays and Tuesdays. But feel free to swing by. Like I said, it's totally public. You can they've got a parking lot. You can pull up, come hang out, ask questions. So that's my sort of day job archaeology that's happening right now. And that's a really cool. It's the oldest house, standing Euro-American house in Connecticut. It was built in 1639. But the collections we're looking at, the areas of the site we're looking at, are very heavily 18th and 19th century. So we have an incredible artifact density, amazing faunal preservation. It's a great site, a really cool site, great learning site too for students. So, swing by and check that out if you happen to be in the area. But I think that's it. Yeah. And you can always follow me on Twitter at Archaeology Game. Where I like to do, some this kind of stuff, but also some science communication stuff and just writing threads about general things on archaeology. So if you want to hear what I think about other archaeological topics, you can check me out there as well.
So as if you weren't busy enough, are there any other hobbies that you have?
Yeah, I do actually. I like to hike and run and do some sort of exercisey things when I can manage to do it. But I've more recently taken up, I'm trying to get into some visual arts. So I've always really admired people who can draw and paint. So I have started to teach myself to draw and to paint. I even share some of my amateurish paintings sometimes on Twitter, if you follow me there. But I'm having a lot of fun with that. It's like, I'm not trying to be a professional. I'm not trying to become, some great artist, whatever. It's just really nice to do a creative output. It's totally altruistic, not altruistic, it's not the right word I'm looking for, but totally not capitalistic, right? It's not a part of my job. I'm not getting paid for it. It's just something fun to practice and trying to find some fulfillment with. So that's my big hobby at the moment is painting and drawing. So
awesome. Again, thank you so much for being on here with us today. We know you're super busy, but thank you very much.
No. Thank you so much for having. Never too busy for this kind of. This is fun. This is the fun part of the job.
All right. That's been this episode of Better Than a Lecture podcast. We'll see you on the next episode.